Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, our lecturer and friends. We are from Group 10. We would like to discuss about interface between morphology and syntax. But before we start our discussion, we would like to introduce ourselves first. My name is Fatia Ramadhani. My student ID number is 081.
My name is Ratna Anjali. My student ID number is 079.
My name is Natasha Putri Patricia. My student ID number is 074.
Causative and applicative. In language, verbs can change in ways that affect how many participants are involved in the action they describe. Two important ways that verbs can change are through causative and applicative morphology. Let's break this down. Causative verbs. Causative verbs introduce a new subject, which is the person or thing causing an action to happen. This means that when we use a causative verbs, we are adding an extra participant to the action. Example, let's consider the verbs to wash. If we say, the car is dirty, we have only one participant, the car. It is the one receiving the action. Now, if we use a causative forms, we could say John washed the car. In this case, we have added John as the new subject who is causing the action of washing. Here, we have two participants, John, the one doing the action, and the car, the one receiving the action. Let's see other example. Let's look at the verb to cook. If we say the pasta is cooking, we only have the pasta as our participant. However, if we say Maria made John cook the pasta, now we have three participants. Maria, the one causing the action, John, the one performing the action, and the pasta, the thing being cooked. Causative verbs are helpful because they show relationship between different participants and how one can influence another. Applicative verbs. Applicative verbs are a bit different. Instead of adding a new subject, they add a new object to the verbs, which helps clarify who is receiving the action. This often helps in making the action clearer or more specific. Example, let's consider to the verb to send. If I say, I sent a letter, there's one object, the letter. But when we use the applicative verbs, we might say, I sent a letter to Sarah. Now we have two objects, the letter, what is being sent, and Sarah, who is receiving the letter. The verbs has expanded to include a new recipient. Now, look at another example. If I say, I told a story, we have just one object, the story. In the application forms, I might say, I told a story to my friends. Now, I have added my friends as a new object, making the action clearer and showing who is involved. This change in verb structure helps to convey more information about who is doing what in the sentence. In summary, causative morphology adds a new subject that causes an action, increasing the number of participants in action, while applicative morphology adds a new object, clarifying who is receiving the action. Understanding these two concepts helps us grasp how different language express relationships between actions and participants.
Noun incorporation. I'll explain noun incorporation, which is another way that languages can express relationships between verb and their arguments. Noun incorporation occurs when a noun becomes part of a verb.
creating a single word that carries both meanings. What is noun incorporation? In languages that use noun incorporation, the object of the verb can merge with the verb itself. This means that instead of saying a verb and its object as two separate words, they can combine into one word. This often happens in languages with a complex grammatical structure known as polysynthetic languages, where words are formed by stringing together smaller parts. Example 1. Let's look at the Araucanian language called Mapunangan. Imagine we have the sentence, my father is looking for the cows. In this sentence, is looking is the verb and the cows is a separate object. In the incorporated form, we could say, my father is looking for cows, but here it changes to my father is cow seeking. This means that cows has combined with seeking into one word. The meaning stays the same, but the structure is different. Example 2. Let's look at another language called Mohawk. In Mohawk, we can take the phrase, John's house is white. Here, John's house is the subject. If we incorporate the noun, we might say the house is white, John, where house and white form a single unit with the verb. This shows that noun incorporation can change the order and the structure of the sentence, creating a more complex meaning. Noun incorporation can make sentence more efficient by combining elements into single words. This allows speakers to convey information quickly without losing clarity. Discussion in linguistics. There is ongoing debate among linguists about whether noun incorporation is a result of morphological rules or synthetic rules. Some argue that it is primarily a morphological process, meaning it deals with the form and the structure of words, while others believe it is synthetic process which focuses on the arrangement of words in sentences. Understanding noun incorporation helps us see how different languages can express ideas in unique ways and how they can change the structure of sentences for efficiency.
Next, on the borders. In this section, we explore areas where it is difficult to determine if certain language structures belong to morphology or syntax. This borderland between the two includes elements that display characteristics of both. Next, clitics. Clitics are small grammatical units that cannot stand alone. But unlike affixes, they are not closely bound to their host words. There are two types. First, simple clitics. These are reduced forms of free morphemes like English contractions in "il" or "id", which follow the same position as their independent forms but attached to various word categories. Second, special clitics. Unlike simple clitics, these have no independent verbs. In French, for example, le, meaning he, is phonologically dependent on a verb forming a single phonological unit. Both types interest morphologists and syntacticians because they combine features of bound morphemes, not standing alone, and syntactic units, independent function within phrases. Next, phrasal verbs and verbs with separable prefixes. Phrasal verbs in English consist of a verb and a particle or a preposition. For example, call up meaning to telephone. These verbs sometimes have idiomatic meanings and may seem like compounds. However, unlike typical compounds, their elements can be separated, especially with pronoun objects. For example, I called her up. In Dutch, verbs with separable prefixes function similarly, combining verbs with elements like prepositions or nouns, for example, oplen, meaning to call up. The structure of these verbs varies with clause type, creating differences in word order between main and subordinate clauses. Next, phrasal compounds. Phrasal compounds consist of a phrase as the first element and a noun as the second. For example, stuff blowing up effects in English. These are of interest because they meet morphological criteria for compounds. Phrases and nouns cannot be interrupted by other modifiers, but contain phrases, a typical subject of syntax. Overall, clitics, phrasal verbs, separable prefix verbs, and phrasal compounds challenge the boundaries between morphology and syntax, making them relevant to both fields of study.
So, in conclusion, in this chapter, you have investigated the relationship between morphology and syntax. We have seen that there are ways in which morphology affects the syntax of sentences. By either reducing or increasing the number of arguments a verb may appear with. We have also looked at cases where it is not entirely clear whether a phenomenon is a matter of morphology or of syntax or of both. Among these phenomena, we find clitics, phrasal verb, separable prefix verb, and phrasal compounds. What such phenomena really show us is that morphology and syntax are often intimately intertwined, and often morphologists must investigate both levels of syntactic organization to really understand how a language works.
We will see in chapter 10 that phenomena like the ones we've looked at in this chapter raise serious questions for theorists and have been the matter of much discussion. We think that's all from our group. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.